They kicked me out in the rain. No suitcase, no goodbye, just silence. 5 years ago, I stood outside their mansion with mascara bleeding into my mouth, while my husband watched from the second-floor window, doing nothing. They thought they erased me. But what they didn't know was that I didn't break. I just disappeared. And while they toasted to their victory, I built an empire. Now I've returned, not for revenge, but for revelation. Because the woman they buried, she came back, rich, untouchable, and holding the deed to their downfall. When I married Lucas Remington, I thought I had entered a fairy tale. Lavish dinners, a sprawling estate tucked behind golden gates, staff who bowed, and a husband who seemed carved from charm. His mother, Beatrice, greeted me with a smile so polished it sparkled. "Welcome to the family," she said, pressing her cool fingers into my shoulder. For a while, I believed her. I believed them all. In those early months, I was the ornamental wife, praised for my grace, complimented for my silence. Lucas would pat my hand during board dinners, saying, "Isn't she lovely?" as if I were a chandelier. They gave me a designer wardrobe, a driver, even a studio in the West Wing. "Your space," Beatrice called it, as if generosity could replace autonomy. The room was immaculate. Soft marble floors, white oak shelving, and glass walls, but the locks only worked from the outside. And when I requested a different shade of lighting for my desk, an assistant returned the next day to say, "Mrs. Remington prefers it this way." I didn't ask again. Still, I smiled. I played my part. Ava, Lucas's older sister, was less subtle than their mother. Where Beatrice used charm like a blade, Ava swung openly. "Let me guess," she sneered one day walking past my studio. "Pinterest taught you to hang art at eye level?" I just finished staging a show apartment for one of their real estate ventures, a minor contribution, but mine. Her voice followed me like mold. Amateurs always think balance means boring. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I belonged here. Then the email came. It was a routine client correspondence I'd crafted. Nothing bold, just an invitation to a gallery event. I copied the wrong address, 1 digit, a minor mistake. But Ava printed it out, slapped it on the family conference table, and declared I had compromised client trust. I wasn't there, of course. Beatrice said later, "Sweetheart, you don't need to attend those meetings. It's best we keep things clean. Clean, like bleach, like erasure." A week later, I noticed Lucas's name missing from a real estate holding we co-managed. When I asked, he waved it off. Consolidation, tax purposes, nothing to worry about. But that night, I saw the documents on his desk, signed. My name wasn't even footnoted. I started to doubt the whispers in the hall were about remodeling. I started to watch the way Beatrice tilted her head when she smiled at me, like she was imagining something more temporary. So I planted a camera. It was a nanny cam hidden inside a bookend in my studio. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd prove myself wrong. The footage was worse than suspicion. Beatrice sat in my studio one afternoon, sipping rosé with Ava. My book samples were spread across the table like trash. "We'll redo this room once she's gone," Ava said. "You think he'll sign?" Beatrice laughed, low and smooth. "He always signs. Madison was just a transitional face. Bland enough to pass. Pretty enough for press. But she's not one of us." I watched the video 5 times, not to understand, but to believe. I confronted Lucas that night. He looked exhausted, or bored. "Their family," he said, "sometimes they vent. Don't take it personally." "It wasn't venting," I said. "They're planning to erase me." He rubbed his temples. "You're being dramatic. You always overreact to things." And just like that, my husband gaslit my reality into fiction. I stopped sleeping, I stopped speaking, I began collecting documents, emails, transfer notices. Beatrice had already begun moving assets, convincing Lucas to shift properties into the family trust, leaving me technically owner of nothing, a shadow, a guest with pearls. Then came the rumor. At first, it was just a whisper at an art show. Wasn't she a masseuse before this? Then a blog post, a photo from years ago taken out of context, me in uniform helping my aunt's wellness clinic. Ava made sure it went viral in the design community. A self-made story, she captioned it. Massage table to marble floors. I could have denied it. But what was the point? In their world, reality didn't matter. Only the version that stuck. Beatrice called me in 2 days later. Her voice was syrup, slow and heavy. I think it's time you and Lucas take some space, for the sake of your peace. I asked if Lucas agreed. She smiled. He doesn't have to. That night, I returned home to find my closet empty, my studio locked. Lucas was at the window again, phone in hand, eyes elsewhere. He didn't look down. A stack of papers waited on the kitchen table. Divorce. Pre-signed. I stared at them for a full minute. Then I sat, uncapped the pen, and signed each one with perfect cursive. When I stood up, I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I looked around the house I once believed was mine, and I smiled. Not the smile of someone who had given up, the smile of someone who had just begun. The air inside the warehouse was stale. Dust and silence mixed in the corners like old regrets. I stood in the middle of it, staring at the cracked concrete floor, my shoes sticking slightly from forgotten spills. This place had once been mine, before I married into the Remington name. Back then, it was my sanctuary. Now, it was all I had left. I slept on a futon in the back office, surrounded by rolls of forgotten wallpaper samples and paint cans too dried to open. No staff, no friends, no family I could call. Just me, my breath, and the ticking of a broken wall clock that reset every midnight. But I had something Beatrice didn't know existed, an account. My mother had opened it in my name before she passed, and I'd quietly funneled small design consultation fees into it for years. It wasn't much, but enough to survive, enough to begin. I swept the warehouse. I cleaned the windows. I repainted the office walls by hand. Each brushstroke scraped bitterness off my bones. With every hour, I reclaimed something, not pride, not power, just space. I posted a listing online, freelance interior planning. No mention of my past, no hint of the empire I'd lost. I signed the emails with just M. Clark, keeping my identity quiet, almost sacred. Clients came slowly at first, small ones, studio apartments, a bakery in Queens. I worked silently, efficiently, pouring in more heart than I'd ever given the Remington mansions. There, I had designed for legacy. Here, I was designing for survival. Weeks passed. Then one morning, while washing my only mug, I looked into the warped reflection of the stainless steel sink. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't flinch. That's when I called him. The number had stayed in my phone under a fake contact name, Marcella Dentist. No one ever questioned it. I hadn't spoken to him since I was 17. Hello? His voice was gruff, unsure. It's me, I said, Madison, a pause, then, I thought you hated me. I thought so too. Silence stretched again. Then he said, you need something. I need your name. My biological father had once been the darling of the East Coast architecture scene, Martin Wells. That was before the scandal. Before he disappeared amid accusations of bribery and unsafe construction permits. But I knew the truth. He'd taken the fall for his partner, for loyalty, for silence. Now, his name was a ghost. But it still had weight. We met 3 days later in a cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and old dreams. His face was more tired than I remembered, but the eyes were the same. Calculating, observant, ready. I want to reactivate one of your old LLCs, I said. Quietly, no headlines. You'll have to clean the name. I know how to do that. And what do I get? I slid over a folder of design sketches. A second chance. He chuckled. God damn, you're my daughter. 2 weeks later, Wells Atelier was back on the registry, revived, repurposed, and legally fronted by me. I'd filed all the necessary paperwork under a shell management firm. Nothing linked back to Madison Remington. That name no longer existed. Using Wells' archive blueprints and my own updated visions, I crafted a new portfolio, a blend of classic architecture and bleeding-edge interior innovation. Then I saw the announcement. Ava Remington was developing a new luxury estate in the Hudson Valley. Minimalist elegance meets generational prestige, the press release read. She wanted cutting edge. She wanted legacy. She didn't know she was about to hire the ghost of her sister-in-law. I submitted the bid under Wells Atelier with a detailed proposal, full 3D mock-ups, and a custom interior line called Eclipse, a name I chose because it sounded beautiful and dangerous. Ava wouldn't recognize me on paper, but when she walked through the mock-up showroom in Manhattan a week later, I'd be watching from behind a mirror wall just beyond the light. She'd stand in a space I designed. She'd run her fingers along materials I hand-picked, and when she smiled, thinking she had found her next visionary partner, she wouldn't know she was touching the beginning of her own undoing. Ava approved the design proposal with barely a second glance. Her assistant sent the confirmation with a generic, glowing message. Ms. Remington is impressed by the bold blend of modern restraint and architectural heritage. I read the line 3 times, not for meaning, but for irony. She had no idea she'd just greenlit the re-entry of the woman she tried to erase. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't a victory. It was placement. One chess piece moved into position. The first real play came 3 days later. I'd hired an intern from their firm, James. Bright, observant, and just bitter enough from years of being overlooked in Beatrice's company to turn loyal fast. His job wasn't to steal secrets. I didn't need secrets. I needed patterns. Who Ava trusted, what suppliers Beatrice prioritized, where the contracts moved. James documented it all and dropped it into a shared folder I named Echo. One afternoon he messaged, "New supplier deal. Ava's cutting costs, switching to a lower-grade marble blend for the foyer." Perfect. I redesigned the mock-up and subtly integrated the cheaper marble. It looked sleek, but under gallery lights, the undertones of artificial sheen were obvious to trained eyes. It was a risk, a calculated flaw designed to attract critique. And it did. Ava toured the showroom with her PR manager and a team of junior designers. At first, she was effusive, but within hours of leaving, she'd posted a thinly veiled takedown on her design blog. Disappointed to see promising firms sacrificing substance for style. Wells Atelier shows potential, but lacks authenticity in material choices. Unfortunate. I let the post sit. Then, slowly, the comments started to shift. Not in her favor. Design critics I had worked with during my early days recognized my spatial arrangements. They chimed in, pointing out the precision, the daring use of negative space, the harmony and tension. One even wrote, "Only a true design thinker knows how to place failure so precisely that it teaches." The comment was reposted across 5 industry pages. Ava had tried to shame me. Instead, she'd endorsed me, publicly, loudly. And with her name attached to the backlash, more clients started reaching out to Wells Atelier. Not just individuals, corporate clients, hotel chains, boutique firms asking for vision proposals. I kept my face away from everything. No photos, no meetings, just perfect designs and the phantom of mystery. Then Beatrice reached out. Her assistant emailed first, asking for a private consultation. I agreed, setting the meeting in a neutral space, a glass conference room atop a co-working building in Tribeca. I arrived early. She arrived on time. She was thinner than I remembered, her face tighter, as if held together by pride alone. She didn't sit. "You're better than I expected," she said, placing a leather folder on the table. "Clean lines, bold choices, controlled drama, you've grown." I stayed silent. "I don't care who you are," she continued. "I care what you can do. I'm proposing we collaborate. My firm has reach. Your eye has fire. Together—" I raised a hand. "Stop." She blinked. "You don't need me," I said. You just need a lifeline." Beatrice straightened, lips parting. "I'm not interested," I said. "You had your chance to see me." A flicker of something passed over her face. Pride, pain, or maybe just surprise that I wouldn't bend. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, "I'm making space." She left without another word. That night, Lucas called. I almost didn't answer, but the old instinct, the part of me that once loved his voice, clicked. Accept. He sounded broken, or maybe just tired. "I saw your name on the guest list for the Avalon project," he said. "I knew it was you. I knew from the style." I said nothing. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for all of it." The silence between us stretched. A past unraveled. "I thought you were fragile," he said, "but I was the one who was weak." I closed my eyes. "I don't need your apology," I said. "I need you to feel what I felt when you watched me leave, when you said nothing, when you let them erase me." His breath caught. "I need you to hurt like I did." I hung up, not in anger, in peace. The email was simple: 1 PDF, 3 screenshots, and a short message. Anonymous tip: cross-reference Form 990 filings with internal expense reports. Numbers won't match. It was sent from a dummy account routed through layers of encryption and an Eastern European server farm. The reporter it reached had built her career exposing high society corruption. She'd know what to do. 3 days later, the story broke. Remington Foundation under federal scrutiny for charity misappropriation. The headlines ran across every major platform: financial news, design blogs, even celebrity gossip sites. Beatrice's face, once a symbol of legacy wealth and philanthropic elegance, was now paired with phrases like embezzlement, tax fraud, and potential federal indictment. I read the article over coffee in my warehouse, legs crossed, face unreadable. The evidence had been real. Beatrice had been skimming donation funds for years, rerouting money meant for youth housing into shell companies that funded her private events. Her clothes, even Ava's startup after its first round, failed. It had all been sitting there, sloppy, arrogant, assuming no one would ever check. The best part? I hadn't even touched the data. James had found it, on an old drive buried in a forgotten office laptop. He hadn't known what it meant. I did. I wrapped it up in a bow and let someone else deliver it. The fallout was fast and vicious. Clients withdrew. Investors backed out. Ava's name was removed from at least 2 design boards by the end of the week. Lucas was photographed stumbling out of a private club at 3 a.m., drunk and disheveled. Beatrice disappeared from public view entirely. And still, I said nothing. No press release, no gloating, no victory speech, just silence. Until Ava showed up. It was dusk. The warehouse door buzzed twice. I recognized the silhouette through the glass before she stepped inside. Slim frame, structured blazer, eyes that used to cut through rooms like knives. "Don't worry," she said. "I'm not here to scream." I gestured toward the old lounge chair. She sat, crossing her legs the same way I had earlier that morning. Some instincts die hard. "I know it was you," she said. I didn't answer. "I came to ask for your forgiveness." That made me look up. She didn't blink. "I believed my mother. I thought she was protecting us. From you." "You believed what you needed to believe," I said. "It's easier to hate than to admit you never saw me." She nodded. "I deserve that." A pause, then softer. "Did you ever wonder why she hated you so precisely?" "No," I said. "I stopped wondering about her a long time ago." "Well, you should have." Ava reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She placed it on the table between us. "I found this when cleaning out her office. She doesn't know I have it." Inside was a hospital intake form, old, faded, but legible. The name under Mother read Beatrice L. Wells, the infant Madison Clark, born in a private clinic in Vermont, adopted 2 weeks later. I didn't breathe. "She had you when she was 19, Ava said. Her parents sent her away. She was told to forget. And then she married into money. She never looked back. I stared at the paper. My life. My real beginning. Written in faded ink. She knew, I whispered. Eventually. When Lucas brought you home, she recognized your name, your face. She had a DNA test run without telling anyone. My fingers brushed the edge of the form. So she knew and still treated me like that? Ava swallowed. She thought if she could bury it hard enough, it wouldn't own her. I nodded slowly. But I did. Yes, Ava said. You became the ghost she couldn't kill. I stood and walked to the large window overlooking the back alley. The city buzzed, unaware that a family was burning behind closed doors. I didn't destroy her, I said. She did that herself. Ava stood too, quiet for a beat. What will you do now? I turned to her, eyes steady. Tell her. Tell her what? I picked up the DNA form and held it out. That the daughter she discarded just took everything back. Success looked different from this side. My name, Madison Clark, was etched into glass walls, whispered at galas, printed in serif font across magazine spreads. Designers I used to admire now quoted me. Clients booked 6 months in advance. Investors called me visionary, as if I hadn't spent years being told to stay out of family meetings. But no one looked me in the eye. They admired me from a distance, respected me, feared me even, but no one touched me. Conversations ended the moment I walked in. Laughter dimmed in my presence. I had won, yes, but I was standing alone on the peak I built. Lucas hadn't resurfaced publicly since the foundation collapse. Paparazzi caught glimpses, glass in hand, shirt unbuttoned, stumbling through private club exits. His eyes were always downcast. When someone asked if he was ashamed, he said, I miss the silence she brought to the house. Ava lost her board seat after the public fallout. She tried launching an independent firm, but it never recovered. The industry moved on, hungry for fresh names, and she had become tainted. Beatrice never responded to the DNA proof. She didn't call, didn't write, didn't deny. She simply vanished. Some said she moved to Italy. Others claimed she had checked into a clinic under another name. Her absence became her final act of control, denying me closure. At first, I thrived on the void. I filled my days with projects, each design more ambitious than the last. I curated art shows, built luxury hotel wings, consulted for restoration of historical sites. Clients clapped. The press adored me. But at night, the silence returned. Sleep became a negotiation. I lay awake counting the ridges in the ceiling, wondering what part of me had to die to build this life. I used to cry for what I'd lost. Now I cried without knowing why. And sometimes, I didn't cry at all. I just stared. One night, I stood in my penthouse overlooking the city skyline and asked aloud, am I winning or just dying slower? The next morning, I packed a bag and left. No press, no headlines, no one followed. They assumed I was in France or Dubai, somewhere exotic, expanding the brand. But I was right back where it started, the warehouse. It smelled the same. Paint dust, old wood, and rain leaking through the vents. The futon was still there. The coffee mug with a crack through the handle. The faint outline of the chalkboard wall where I'd mapped out my first comeback. I sat on the floor and stared at nothing for hours. Then I started to clean, not like before. No transformation, no symbolic gesture, just cleaning. Sweeping dust into piles, rinsing brushes I'd never used, folding the blanket I used when the walls echoed too loudly. And while folding, I realized I wasn't angry at Beatrice anymore. I didn't hate her. I didn't admire her. I just understood her. She was a woman trying to outrun a version of herself. A scared girl forced to make brutal choices, who learned to survive by making others small. She had tried to bury the parts of her past that didn't fit the persona. I'd done the same, just with better taste in lighting. What I couldn't forgive wasn't her. It was me. I'd built an empire from my pain. And somewhere along the way, I had let that pain become my language, my currency, my compass. I had weaponized grief and called it ambition. But I missed softness, missed warmth, missed the sound of my own laughter. So I stood and began removing every frame from the wall. Photos of awards, magazine covers, letters from clients, every polished artifact that reminded me of who I'd become. I laid them in a crate, one by one, careful, gentle. In the middle drawer of my old desk, I found the first sketch I'd ever drawn for a real client. A small Brooklyn loft. The lines were crooked, the coloring sloppy, but it had heart. I smiled. Then I picked up a pen and wrote a letter. Not for Beatrice, not for Ava, not for Lucas. For me. It read, I forgive you for thinking power could fix what love left broken. I forgive you for mistaking silence for peace. I forgive you for surviving, but not living. But I cannot go back, not to them, not to her, not to who I was. I forgive you, but I will never return. I folded the letter and placed it on the now empty desk. No frame, no seal, just paper and ink and truth. Then I walked out of the warehouse, closed the door, and didn't look back. It began with a knock, not media, not a client. Just a soft, tentative knock on the door of the modest design studio I had quietly opened in Brooklyn. I'd left my name off the signage. No branding, no marble counters, just wood, light, and space. The way creation is supposed to begin. She was 16, maybe 17, holding a worn sketchbook with trembling fingers and eyes too wise for her age. She said nothing at first, just looked around as if stepping into a cathedral. Then she saw me. "You're Madison Clark," she whispered. I smiled gently. I used to be. She stepped forward, reached into her coat pocket, and pulled out a thin envelope. "I got this," she said, handing it over. "You fund scholarships under Wells Atelier Legacy Grant. This says I'm one of them." I opened the envelope. My signature stared back at me from the bottom of the award letter. I'd signed hundreds just like it, trusting my team to find the right recipients. I looked back at her. "What's your name?" "Jordan." "And why are you here, Jordan?" She took a deep breath. "Because your work made me believe that broken people can still build beautiful things." That moment stayed with me longer than any award ever had. 2 months later, the school opened. It wasn't large, just 3 rooms above a repurposed factory. The sign on the door read, "The Assembly." No tuition, no tests, just access. We took in women from all walks of life, single mothers, high school dropouts, immigrants, abuse survivors, anyone who had been told they weren't enough. I taught the first class myself. The first exercise was simple. Design a space, I told them, where you feel completely safe. They were quiet at first, unsure. Then pencils moved. Then voices followed. And within weeks, the room buzzed with energy and light. Women who once apologized for existing now argued passionately about color theory and spatial flow. One of them, Layla, said, "This place is louder than the silence I grew up in." They didn't design for power. They didn't chase revenge. They created to breathe. That was the difference between them and me. They didn't need to destroy to feel real. Every graduate left with more than a portfolio. They left with community, with self-respect, with the knowledge that their story mattered, not because of what they'd suffered, but because of what they had shaped from the rubble. I didn't speak to the press, didn't return to the spotlight, but the world had a way of finding me. One morning, while sorting donation receipts, I found a letter wedged between 2 invoices. No envelope, just cream stationery and 4 words in sharp, slanted handwriting. "You were always worthy." No name, no return address, but I knew. I knew the loops in the Y, the slant of the jabu. It was Beatrice. There was no apology, no explanation, just those words. For the first time in years, I didn't feel heat rise in my chest. No anger, no closure, just breath, as if a long, locked window had finally cracked open. That week, I accepted an invitation I'd turned down 5 years in a row. TED Women, keynote speaker. I wore a black suit. Simple. No designer tag. My notes were handwritten. The room went silent as I stepped on stage, thousands of eyes fixed on the woman they thought they knew. I told them about power, not the kind bought with money or inherited through name, but the kind that comes from choosing not to break when breaking would be easier. I spoke about silence, the kind women carry like a second spine. I spoke of rebuilding, not in revenge, but in clarity. And I ended with this. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's sovereignty. I don't forgive because they deserve it. I forgive because I deserve peace. The audience didn't clap at first. They stood. Then the emails came. One caught my eye immediately. Subject line, another Remington daughter found. No body text, just an attached image. A photo of a young woman, early 20s, brown eyes, strong jaw, holding a birth certificate in one hand, adoption papers in the other. And there it was again. Beatrice's name. A long silence stretched around me, quiet and deep. I didn't open the image fully. Not yet. I closed the laptop, walked outside, and stood in the sunlight. Because this wasn't the beginning of another war. It was the chance to build something better than legacy, something free,